Well, the Dallas Cowboys unofficial depth chart is out. And yes, it is unofficial. And yes, we will overreact. Let's get to it. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central. And catching up with you guys in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with quick-hitting videos such as this one. Well, yesterday, around the afternoon, evening, the Cowboys released their first unofficial depth chart. And boy, oh boy, do we love this time of the year because we can get to overreact about some of the things that we see on the depth chart. Even though they put it in big, bolded letters, this is unofficial, right? And this is not the Cowboys coaches giving the entire NFL their secrets or, the other 31 NFL teams that did the same thing with these depth charts. So they don't want to give out all of the secrets. So there's some stuff in here that is definitely not accurate. But we might overreact today, but also there's some legitimate crumbs in these kind of like documents where you can read between the lines and maybe you can go like, okay, what does this mean? What could this mean? And sometimes, yes, the correct answer is a big ball of nothing, but there are some things at least that I believe, are telling us a little something. So how about we get started with that? And as the title of this video says and the thumbnail says, what about this Cowboys rookie that the Cowboys seem to like a lot? Now, direct your eyes to the linebacker rows here on the defensive part of the Cowboys unofficial depth chart. How about Maurice Liufau being listed as one of the 3 starting linebackers on the Cowboys? Now, note that Micah Parsons is listed as a defensive end, so he's not on the linebacker list right now. But on the Cowboys linebackers, on the starting lineup, you've got, first and foremost, you've got 12 starters, which might sound weird, right? But at the end of the day, I like it because the Cowboys are supposed to run a 4-3 defense, and they're obviously going to run a lot of nickel because that's the way that the offenses play nowadays. You got to match the personnel. So it makes sense to me to have 3 linebackers in there, but also have the nickel cornerback in there, who is, by the way, Jordan Lewis. But the linebackers are Eric Kendricks and Damon Clark, who I actually believe are the top 2 linebackers on the Cowboys right now, like the way that they view them. I think the Cowboys, week 1, they will start Kendricks, they will start Clark whenever they are on nickel, and it's only 2 of them out there on the field. But interestingly enough, Maurice Liufau makes the starting lineup while the Marvion Overshown takes a backseat with the second team. So is there something to that? It's difficult to say. Obviously, I know we are overreacting. The natural overreaction would be to say Maurice Liufau is about to be a surprise rookie, right? Because a 3rd-round draft pick, and he's being listed with the starters. He could be in for a big role. Now, I have to pause a little bit in that area, and I have to be like, Overshown has a legitimate shot, and I think that there's an ongoing battle for the number 3 spot at linebacker. However, what I think is true is the Cowboys seem to really like Maurice. Like, the Cowboys seem to be excited about the guy that they found in the 3rd round, which is kind of funny because at the time in April, people were like, that's the worst pick, right? Like, people were like, if they reached at any point this NFL draft, it wasn't Guyton at 29th. It wasn't, it wasn't their 54th pick, Marshawn Nealon, who was perceived as a draft steal by many analysts. It was Maurice Liufau. And we talked in April about how a lot of people had day 3 draft grades on the Notre Dame rookie. We talked about how maybe they forced it because they needed to pick a linebacker because of the lack of depth at the position. But since then, what have we heard? We've heard that Mike Zimmer loves the kid, and we heard the call on draft night when Mike Zimmer was like, you sold me the moment you told me the assignments for every single player out there on the field. So the Cowboys made a bet on his IQ. And if you have heard anything about the Mike Zimmer defense, there's absolutely a level of IQ required of these linebackers because there's so much going on. Players love to talk about how fun or challenging, in the case of the offense, going against Mike Zimmer's, disguised defense looks has been. But part of it also has to do with the linebackers and how they're able to communicate, obviously. So interesting that Marius Liufau is listed above Overshown. My only take on that, the one thing that I can say for sure is that Overshown does not have like that spot guaranteed. Because the Cowboys like Marius Liufau to the point that we keep seeing him with the twos, sometimes with the ones in practice. They're trying to give him that role. There's that video that Law Nation took where Marius Liufau just blows up Tyler Smith, sends him to the ground. And the big like kind of question mark of Liufau coming out of college was about how well does he see things. And with all of the praise that we've heard for his IQ, it certainly seems like, and vision and IQ is not the same, but it feels like Liufau is overcoming that challenge. And one part that is interesting to me is Overshown is Dan Quinn's guy. Marius Liufau is Mike Zimmer's guy. How does that factor into this conversation? I think that part is interesting. Because you would assume like Overshown is in his second year, so he has the advantage over Marius. But Overshown is also kind of in his second year, but also not really. Because he didn't play for the entirety of the 2023 season, right? He was hurt in the preseason and then had to miss the rest of the year, which is not ideal for development or anything like that. So if anything, these two are on a pretty even race or position before the battle itself. But I think these two are battling it out. I think it might extend itself, this battle, until the regular season. It's going to be fun. But that's something to keep in mind. Overshown is Dan Quinn's guy. And the mold is obvious, right? You've got a player that was once a safety, moved to linebacker, that yields that Dan Quinn, right? That hybrid type model of a player. While Marius comes in and he impresses everybody with his IQ, that is much more Mike Zimmer. So keep an eye out for that, because I think we might have a surprise rookie in our hands. Now, I'm going to go over to the offense side of things, because I think the other takeaway that stands out of the page or sticks out of the page immediately is the fact that your starting offensive line includes Chuma Edoga at left tackle, and it includes Brock Hoffman at center. What to make out of that? And my response would be not a whole lot, right? The Cowboys since day one have given Guyton and have given Brock Hoffman, Cooper Beebe, this like rookie, you gotta earn it type treatment. And that's what is going on right now. I think so far, Guyton has looked better than Edoga. Obviously, he's been out with illness and all that, and maybe he hasn't been practicing as much, but Guyton had that chance to go up against Micah Parsons, excelled in that area in that first padded practice. That doesn't mean that he will never struggle. He will go through growing pains, but Guyton has shown that, hey, he's not as raw as we all thought he was. Meanwhile, Chuma does seem to get beaten up pretty consistently by Micah, and he might be higher on the Cowboys board than the fans is. I think fans would have expected Chuma to be a cut candidate. Right now, it seems like he's a top backup tackle on their minds. So not a surprise there, but I would expect Guyton to start week one. Hoffman is a little bit different, right? Because Cooper Beebe is learning to do something that he didn't do in college, which is snapping the football, and maybe he's not looking as sharp at it as we would have expected him to, while Brock Hoffman is taking care of his business, right? Like, he is doing his stuff, maybe not in a flashy, perfect way, but Brock Hoffman is doing his job, and he's like, if you're going to sit me on the bench, then that guy has to figure out the snaps first, right? Like, he's good enough to that point. And we know that BB outplays Hoffman in the power department. Like, he's going to have more power. He's going to have higher play strength. He's going to be able to set the tone in the running game, whereas I don't know that Hoffman can do that. But Hoffman is also not going to cost you a game with a costly mistake, while BB might, because he's just learning this stuff, and based on the looks of it and what we've heard from players and coaches, like, this might take a little bit longer for Cooper Beebe, which is fine. I don't think we should, like, treat a third-round draft pick as boom or bust week one. Are you starting or not? Like, If Cooper Beebe ends up starting mid-season, there's nothing wrong with that, honestly, because he's learning a new position. Now, we'll see if he does figure that out, right? Because that's a big part of this conversation. But anyways, that's one of the biggest takeaways. Let me tell you this one, man. Let me tell you about this one. We're going to go not to the defensive side of things, but the special teams side of things. No one is going to be surprised that the Cowboys have Brandon Aubrey at kicker, Brian Anger at punter, Trent Sieg as the long snapper. But how about this? Yesterday, we talked about how important the battle to return kicks on the Cowboys was going to be. That's what we talked about yesterday. And we talked about, okay, it's Cavante Turpin in kick return, but then you get a second returner, and Mike McCarthy essentially admitted that the Cowboys are going to have two returners out there, which is likely going to happen for every other NFL team as well, because that seems like the best way to do it. Who accompanies Cavante? And we talked about several players here, and I'm interested in the players that were listed here on the unofficial depth chart, both on kickoff return and punt return, because they're different, but if you're being considered for one, you're likely being considered for the other as well. Two names stand out, and it's two names that we discussed yesterday: Rico Dowdle, Jalen Cropper. What to make out of these two being here on the second team besides Cavante Turpin? Like, Rico has a major advantage in the sense that that guy is making the roster. Like, there's no universe bearing any injury that Rico is not on the 53. I think we all know that. So he is the natural favorite for this discussion, because the other guys that we're going to get into are not roster locks. Rico Dowdle is. Now, it would be wild maybe to have your top running back, if he is their top running back, returning kicks, because we're thinking about injuries, we're thinking about all that, but also the new rules are designed for fewer injuries. And I do wonder how much of an impact that will have in how NFL teams do this. Like, will we see big name players, maybe even superstar players like, I don't know, Tyreek Hill returning kicks? Do you think in a playoff game Tyreek Hill wouldn't be out there returning a kickoff? I think he might. But anyways, Rico Dowdle could be in that discussion. The most interesting name there is Jalen Cropper. He's listed in punt. But again, man, that's two similar roles. I think if you're thinking about playing one in one of these two assignments, you should be thinking about the other way around too. Jalen Cropper being in there is significant to me, because Ryan Flournoy, for example, is not. And we were talking earlier in the week about, how does Jalen Cropper get into this thing? How does Jalen Cropper fit into the 53-man roster? And if there is one thing that he might be able to do to fulfill what has been a strong training camp so far into a roster spot, it might be the fact that, hey, I can return kicks. And if you don't have a quality kick returner on the other side of the field, opposite of Cavante Turpin, then what's going to happen is teams are going to kick away from Cavante. Got to have a strong returner, and if Cropper can prove to be that, is there a scenario where the Cowboys maybe get creative, maybe send Flournoy to the IR, right? Maybe stash him a little bit on PUP, that kind of stuff, and allow Jalen Cropper a shot at making the team and being on the special teams as a returner. Could happen. Other two names on that list: Deuce Vaughn. We've talked a lot about him. I think he's on the roster bubble right now. By the way, Deuce Vaughn is listed as the bottom running back at offense, and he's here in the third team area with the returners. And last but not least, David Durden, who did return kicks when he was... Oh, and by the way, I was going to say, Jalen Cropper did not return a lot of kicks at college. He had like 5 attempts in 22 games played, so there is that. But David Durden did return a little bit more kicks and punts at Mercer, had some touchdowns even. Could he have a shot? Special teams-wise, I wouldn't doubt it. I just don't know if he's earning it on the wide receiver side of things. Has had some moments, for sure has had some moments, but enough to overcome Tyron Billy Johnson, Jalen Cropper, Ryan Flournoy. That would be pretty tough. And, some other observations as we get towards the final stretch here on the show. Trey Lance listed as a number 3 QB at a quarterback, right? So it's going to be Dak, Cooper, and Lance. We'll see in the preseason how the Cowboys split these snaps. That's going to be fun. Do they give Cooper Rush one drive and then the rest of the show is Lance's? Do they give the entire game to Trey Lance? could happen, I guess. So there's that. Noteworthy that, hey, Malik Davis is above Deuce Vaughn, so Deuce seems to be buried in that unofficial depth chart. Keyword unofficial, remember. But anyways, Jalen Brooks with the second team wide receivers alongside Cropper and Cavante Turpin. So Ryan Flournoy basically buried in the among the third stringers. But again, how much of that is the fact that we're talking about a 6th-round rookie who, has a tough time, kind of making his name official on the roster. And how about the tight ends? Peyton Hendershot makes it as the 3rd tight end above the 4th one, who is John Stephens Jr. That's an interesting battle to watch right there. And then you've got the 2 UDFAs at the bottom of it, Brevin Spanford, Alec Holler. I think they've had some moments, but maybe not enough to get into this discussion that, hey, they're going to be making this team. We'll see what they do in the preseason, though. That's I think, the big takeaways, honestly. Again, you don't want to overthink this. Noteworthy that Zeke is listed above Rico, I guess, because that's been a question mark. Other than that, I don't see any surprises in this unofficial depth chart. Let me know what you think, what surprised you, what didn't. Obviously, this is unofficial, not a huge deal, but still something that I think as fans we love to talk about anytime we get the chance to do so. So anyways, hit the like button for me. Hope that you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you tomorrow here on A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. Bye-bye.